Welcome to Desert Island Geek. Each episode, we welcome one self-confessed geek to our deserted island. But there's a catch. They may bring 5, and only 5, of their most essential geek items they simply cannot live without. So joining me in the customs office for this programme is Kevin Leach. Kevin, welcome.
Hello.
Now, Kevin, I was going to introduce you, but then I thought, no, I think it will be better if Kevin introduces himself. So, Kevin, who are you?
Well, my name is Kevin Leach, and I have a background in broadcasting as a radio presenter back in the day when I worked on commercial radio and then did a little bit of local BBC radio. I moved into the technical side of broadcasting, working for BBC News in their radio studios, and that led me to develop a business and a product which is called IPDTL.com, which is actually how you and I, Matt, are talking to each other right now.
That kind of is your geek credentials, which is why you're welcome to try and get on the island with your 5 items. We have a website, a podcast, a Twitter feed, a book, and a gadget or device. That's what we're going to be going through today.
Okay.
And so let's start off with your website. Which one will it be?
Well, you say your website, and it is actually my website that I've chosen, which is a bit naughty, I imagine, and it would be interesting to see if this is allowed. But then, you invited me on the podcast, and why wouldn't I try and plug my own flipping website, which is I've already mentioned it, and I'll mention it again. You should probably count these as the podcast goes on. Write this down at home, people. It's IPDTL.com, which is a bit of a mouthful. If you break it down, IP is Internet Protocol. Of course, we all know that, don't we? And DTL is down the line, which if you work in broadcasting, particularly TV broadcasting, it's a common term for, how we're going to interview this guest. Are they going to come into the studio? No, we'll do it as a DTL. We'll do it as a down the line. So they might sit in a studio in Glasgow and be interviewed on, I don't know, Newsnight in London, down the line. Now, these days with the internet, we don't have lines, or in the old-fashioned sense, like a pair of wires, but it's the same concept of being transmitted, audio and or video, across the internet, down the line. And the website allows you to do that in real time, across the internet, a bit like technology which is still around, called ISDN. We've kind of replicated that with just a website. It runs in the Chrome web browser, and you just plug in a microphone and connect it to your studio, and with the magic of the internet, it works. And that's, as I say, that's how I'm talking to you now, and that's how radio broadcasters and voiceovers particularly are now operating, working from home, or reporting from the field or whatever, all being done via this exciting new technology.
I can't allow it.
After all that, I haven't even told you why yet, and immediately you say you can't allow it.
I can't allow it. In the rules. In the rules of Desert Island Geek, a website can include information sites, applications, games, entertainment, but excludes media networks, such as movies and TV on demand,
it's not one of them.
Social networks,
it's not one of them,
or Twitter/chat.
Chat, is that where you get us on the chat element?
I think I'm going to have to enforce the chat aspect of it, because I think part of the kind of marooned nature is that you'll probably be just by yourself. The idea of being able to talk to people in, of course, superior quality is not allowed.
I mean, I was going to ask you what the internet connection is like on this island, because it may be that it's not suitable anyway.
It's kind of unknown.
Right. Fills me with horror. So it's probably just as well that you won't let me on with the with the website?
Yeah, so we've had the incident on the island. So in the previous episode, we had Neil Dixon on,
Right.
and he's the former customs officer. And in late 2008, there was a incident on the island which caused it to be closed since 2008 until this time in 2014. The cause of the incident and his involvement have not been sorted out yet. But it did mean that the island was not suitable for human beings for the last 6 years. And so the internet connection back in 2008 was a little bit dodgy. We thought that the enclosure for the podcast would be a coconut shell. So we didn't quite know much about the broadband connection. And we can't imagine after the incident that it's improved. And
you won't allow me... You see, we'll obviously come on to the gadget later on. You won't allow me to bring a satellite broadband, like a BGAN or something. That's not allowed, is it? Because that would solve this problem.
You could bring it, but there would probably have to be some tight restrictions around its usage.
Then it's hardly worth it, is it? Then well, that's a disaster. Then we've hardly started, and already you're not. You see, I could have run my business from the island. I could have. Yeah, I assume that being marooned there would be quite an interesting story for the media. I could have done media interviews. That could have earned me some money for when I get home, assuming I might get home.
I fully understand, but I'm afraid we have to stick with these rules. They are written on a scroll. And,
well, if it's written on a scroll, then
it's got to be followed.
That's understandable. Okay.
So do you
can't argue with a scroll?
No, never argue with a scroll. Do you have a backup website that you would like to take? Wikipedia, by the way, is already available by default.
Right. Okay. Have you cached this somewhere on the island, or have you printed it out? That's what my mother would do. Is that with Wikipedia? Is she'd print it all out so that she can just refer to it in paper form.
I'm not quite sure how it's quite delivered at the moment.
Okay, fine.
But it's there.
We can work on that. So the backup plan. Well, as this is a geek-themed podcast, I'll go with my favourite geek website. And it must be one of the geekiest websites out there. And it answers questions that I don't know the answer to myself about building websites and servers and the kind of stuff that I don't really understand, but try and blag my way through for the purposes of running my business. And it's called stackoverflow.com. I don't know if you've come across this, but if you have any questions about the basic website stuff like HTML and CSS, or more complex server shenanigans, for want of a better word. In fact, that is quite a good word. Every answer you could ever imagine is on there, and I don't understand half the stuff that they say, but you can always find the answer to your question on that website. It's amazing.
Stackoverflow.com.
Yeah, and which I think is a reference. I don't even know what it means. It's a reference to a computer crashing, I think, the kind of the memory getting used up. That's known as a stack overflow, and that's when your computer falls over.
Okay. Stack Overflow. That sounds like a reasonable website. Sounds like something you could take onto the island along with Wikipedia to find out.
I mean, it's no use, of course, without my computer or my internet connection, but I'll have it anyway.
Okay, great. Let's move on, because I can feel a sense of
frustration building.
And a podcast.
Okay, well, I had to think about this, and this isn't a geek one as such. You could say it's geeky in a sense, I suppose. It's a radio program which the BBC produce a podcast of, which is called Geoffrey Smith's Jazz, and it's a program on Radio 3, which is on a Saturday night, I think, but they also produce it as a podcast. And I was thinking, if I'm going to be on this island, there's going to be a lack of music around, and music's a big part of my life. I like listening to music. It makes me happy, and I've got into jazz music recently, but both to dance to and to enjoy. And this show, I just think the guy does a really good job of working through the kind of from the beginnings of jazz through the ages, and kind of tells a little story as he goes and plays some classic tracks. And the good thing, because it's all old music, it's all out of copyright, so it's fine to podcast it as well. That's obviously a problem with many podcasts, is that you can't, a lot of music podcasts can't really happen because all the music's protected by publishers and copyright. So it's a legal music podcast, and it's great. And I think if I was on the island, that is what I would want to listen to.
So it's some audio sort of stories and information about the writer and performer plus their music, yeah?
It's all jazz. He tells the story of mostly traditional jazz through the years, and it's mostly by just playing. It's just music with linked. Well, that's what all radio is, isn't it? It's just music linked together with somebody talking, and that's what it is. I don't know why I've tried to make it sound more complicated than it is. It's a guy talking and playing records, the classic music, the classic radio program, and it works very well.
Okay, and that's released every week, is it?
Yes, I believe it is.
Okay,
and I should say, I'm sounding very sophisticated here, and don't get me wrong, I am very sophisticated, but I'm generally not a Radio 3 listener yet. That's something to aspire to, but that's how I dip my toe into the pond of Radio 3 on a weekly basis. That was a ridiculous analogy.
It will keep your mood up with a little bit of dancing around the island, and you'll learn a little bit more as well.
Yeah.
Okay. I think.
Can I have that?
You can have that. No problem. That one's safe. So from a podcast, we'll soon be finding out the book that you're going to take, which is very geeky, and also your gadget or device. But first, I need...
in the industry, ladies and gents, we call that a trail ahead.
Indeed.
There was your tease to later in the podcast.
A Twitter feed is the third out of your 5 choices, please. Who will it be?
Okay, I had to think long and hard about this, and as you've probably guessed by now, radio in various guises has been my life, really. I grew up listening to the radio. I've always been excited by radio. If anything, my excitement for radio has drifted over the years. I'm still very excited by the concept of live broadcasting, even just you and I having this live chat now between your secret location and my location here in Manchester. It excites me. And the industry as a whole is still a big part of my life. Most of my friends work in broadcasting, and most of my references in life are broadcast related. So on that basis, I've chosen a UK radio themed website, which is called Radio Today. It's it's the industry website now in the UK. It took over from the Radio Magazine as kind of the place that you turn to find radio industry news. And they've got a Twitter feed, which is at Radio Today. It would keep me up to date with the industry that, as I say, has been a big part of my life. I don't think I would miss it that much, to be honest with you, but I'd still like to kind of know what's going on, so that when eventually I got off the island and caught up with old friends, I'd be able to say, oh, did you see about what he did and that programme, and I can't believe they've done that to that station, or whatever.
Sounds good to me. So at Radio Today is your Twitter feed. We're unclear still at the moment because of me being a new customs officer here, and I tried to get out of the old one their ideas, but whether or not you would be able to actually follow any of the links given in the Twitter in the individual tweet or not.
Right, or whether you've got to kind of get the crux of the story from the tweet, yeah. And retweets, are they allowed? Because I was trying to think of who does the most retweets that are relevant to me, and you could actually, before you go on the island, and this is a little bit devious, before you go on the island, you could set up your own Twitter account that just retweets everything that you're interested in. That would be a loophole, wouldn't it?
It would be a loophole. Don't go giving any other people any ideas, but I do. That is quite cunning.
Thank you.
I like that one. So at the moment, it will be at Radio Today unless you come up with your devious plan, in which case I will allow that because I do like devious plans.
Oh, well, in that case, I'll do that.
Great. So at devious plans will be your Twitter
I wonder
feed.
if that's available. Not for long.
Not for long. All right. So we've move on now to a book, and it can be a physical book or it can be an e-book. So before you tell us your book, what format will it take?
I think just an old-fashioned book. I've never really got it. Well, and you have... You seem to have a downer on any kind of technology, which is ironic, considering what the theme of the podcast is. You do seem to have a bit of a downer on actually allowing any technology. So, but that's not a problem for me because I've never really, I've never owned a Kindle or, in fact, I bought my first tablet last week purely for testing purposes. Those kind of gadgets. I mean, I do carry 2 phones, which is probably, I probably don't need to carry much more. And when does a large phone become a tablet? But I'm getting off the point anyway. I'm not a tablet owner or user as such, and therefore, if I am going to read a book, and I'm not a big book reader, then it will. I like an old-fashioned book.
Hardback or softback?
Softback in this instance.
Yeah.
I think we call it paperback.
Possibly. So tell me what your book is, please.
Okay, my softback book is called Teach Yourself HTML in 10 Minutes. This is a book which I have just looked up to see if it still exists because I bought it in, let's say, 1996, 1997, when I was building my first website. And it's great. It's a little bit misleading, the title, because it isn't just, you can't read the whole book in 10 minutes. You can't teach yourself HTML in 10 minutes, but it's a series of 10-minute lessons, nice little bite-sized lessons which teach you the basics of HTML and how to build a website. And HTML was quite basic in those days. It wasn't as, you didn't have all the CSS stuff that you have now, and that from having no knowledge as to how to build a website, that gave me my grounding that has helped me a lot in over the years, and especially I think trying to learn how to build a website as I had to just over a year ago, just before we launched our product. I think without that basic grounding that this book gave me, it would have been either impossible or would have been a much more daunting task.
Is it the one from Sam's Publishing?
It is the one from Sam's Publishing. You know it, or at least you've Googled it.
I've Googled it, and they now do Teach Yourself HTML5 in 10 minutes.
That's why I wrote it down wrong.
5th edition. So I think they've, as HTML has moved on, I think they've slowly changed things up.
Mm-hmm. I would say go back to the very basic one and learn those basics, and then everything on top of that is a bonus. But if you don't understand those basics, then there's no hope. And listen, young people, this is an important skill which will get you far in life. If you've got a basic understanding of web code, it will help you in the future. Until, of course, that's assuming the internet catches on. Maybe it won't become a thing in the future.
240 pages, this one is. So do you think it would just end up frustrating you because you will have A, read it quite fast, and B, not actually be able to use what you're learning and put it into practice?
There's an element of that. Yeah, it's a good point that you make. I think the beauty of the book is, I've referred back to it many times over the years, and of course it's all in my head now. I'm an expert on such matters, but I have it's the kind of book that you can keep referring back to remind yourself the bits that you forgot or the bits that weren't important originally that you now need to know. So it isn't I looked at and thought about various books that you wouldn't want to read more than once. And I don't think, I don't think it would be worth taking a story onto a desert island, because once you've read the story, you might want to read it again, I don't know, a few years later, but you can't keep reading the same story over and over again. Whereas, so I thought you'd need a book that you can keep going back and referring to, and maybe, even though I wouldn't be able to put it into practice, it would just be enough to keep those basic skills there for, again, assuming that I'm going to return back to what we call normal life. That may never happen, of course. Or maybe the current customs officer, who we understand, is a little bit tricky, moves on. Maybe the future customs officer might modernise and allow the internet onto the island. You never know.
I'm imagining a scenario where you have been learning HTML and you have had to write it on rocks. and
you still forget to close the flipping bracket.
Yeah, you'll probably.
I forgot to close the div.
I'm imagining someone finding you on your island, arriving there, you conversing with them in English, but then them seeing all of these rocks, and if they have not read the book or are that way inclined, thinking you have gone mental, what are all of these square brackets? And you keep repeating yourself with these strange words.
Or if they are that way inclined, they'll just pick your code to pieces, which is what normally happens.
I'm imagining the quintessential help written in stones on the top of the island with opening and closing brackets. So very good. I'm going to allow that. So that sounds great. I if slightly annoying that you couldn't actually sort of use it and type some stuff in, but it will give you lots of ideas and lots of potential faith that you will get off the island, and that you'll be able to, that you've used your time productively.
Yeah, and it's a reminder of my former life. I quite like that.
Okay. Finally then, gadget or device?
This was quite an easy one, really, assuming it's allowed. And that's a portable audio recorder, and it goes back to my love of capturing sound and recorded sound and broadcasting. Again, this is assuming that there may be, eventually this content may find an audience. What better to do when you're stuck on a desert island than to create an audio diary and record all the exciting and interesting sounds and share your thoughts with and it kind of, I think it would give you hope as well. That hope that one day somebody might hear this, whether or not they actually end up hearing it. The idea of being able to capture, and I suppose. I'm guessing you wouldn't allow some kind of solar charging unit to go with it, because that's the danger, is that it will run out. But then you would just use it wisely and only record the really good content.
So your gadget is a audio recording device, which is absolutely fine within the rules.
Now, I did also say that I'd like to take some headphones with that device. How do you feel about that? Because the idea of using such a device without monitoring what you're capturing on headphones would upset me greatly. Would I be allowed to bring, and they could just be a pair of good earbuds, perhaps? Would that be okay?
To counter the disappointment I gave you from the get-go, then yes, you may bring some headphones.
Thank you, Matt.
No problem. No problem.
It's very kind of you.
You're welcome.
Do I call you Matt or Sir?
Either is fine.
Okay.
Either is fine. Or Sir Matt. So thank you very much. Those 5 items are going through to the desert island. Do you think you are going to enjoy yourself? Are you relishing the opportunity for a little bit of downtime?
Yeah, well, I mean, that would be great. I do like the idea. I mean, we always assume that a desert island will be beautiful weather, don't we? Assuming that it's not constant sandstorms, or I like the sunshine. So if the weather's nice, and I don't have to spend all of my time capturing audio and reading geeky books and websites, and I get to chill out with some of my jazz music, then yeah, I think I'll have quite a nice time.
Kevin Leach, thank you very much for joining me. We wish you a pleasant stay.
Thank you very much.
This programme was produced and presented by Matt Wade. To listen to previous episodes, either subscribe in iTunes, your podcast app of choice, or head to desertislandgeek.com. To get in touch with the programme, if you want to take part, have a comment, or want to suggest a geek for a future podcast, drop us a message in a bottle to customs@desertislandgeek.com.